Today's lesson is on our Cinnabon cinnamon rolls. These are the cinnamon rolls that you will make for Javaccino. I am making a very small batch of cinnamon rolls. When you make these for class, you will be making I believe 6 times this recipe, and I'll discuss that a little bit during the demo and show you some of the differences. To get started today, we have to have our yeast activated, and I've already started that process, and as you can see, it is growing. It started as 1 cup. And that it is growing, the volume is, because the yeast is growing and producing CO2. So our yeast is in beautiful shape and ready to go. The next thing you need to do is scald your milk. Now, I've already scalded this milk for the sake of time. To scald it means you heat it just below boiling. And I've already done that. And the reason you scald the milk is there is a chemical in milk that will kill the yeast. However, if you scald the milk, you destroy the chemical. So you scald the milk, and that way your yeast will still work. Now, we have to think about yeast. We know that if yeast is put with a very hot liquid, it will die. So we cannot add scalding hot milk to our yeast because it'll kill the yeast, and we'll have hockey pucks for cinnamon rolls. So what we're going to do to bring down the temperature of this milk quickly is we're going to add our butter and our sugar to it, and that'll help get the heat to dissipate. So we need 2/3 cup of butter, and 2/3 cup of butter is 10 tablespoons and 2/3 of a tablespoon, which is 2 teaspoons. Okay. Now, when you guys make this, you're making such a larger quantity that it will be much bigger. Okay. So that will help bring it down, and my sugar, which is pre-measured, is right here. So I will put that in there. I can put my salt in there. Now the salt has a very important function in yeast bread. This yeast here will just keep growing and growing and growing until you have, like, your room's taken over by yeast bread. So the salt controls it. So the sugar feeds it, and the salt controls it so it can't grow out of control. So I am going to stir this here to bring down the temperature of the milk. Now, some students want to add the eggs right here as well, which is fine, except if you add the eggs into hot milk, it will cook your eggs and you'll have scrambled eggs inside your cinnamon rolls, and that doesn't work either. So what I'm going to do is, when you're making this in class, it's going to be much larger quantities, so you can put all the butter into your milk and just let it melt until you're ready for it. So we'll come back in just a minute when this butter is ready. Okay, our butter is just about melted, so now, and the milk has cooled down. So I'm going to go ahead and add our eggs. We needed 2 eggs for this. Now again, when you're making this in class, you're going to need about 12 eggs per batch, and then you'll make 2 large batches. So we'll have about 120 cinnamon rolls. Okay? We don't do anything small scale for Javaccino. All right? So this will be in a great big soup pot or a stock pot when you're doing this in class, rather than this small little skillet. Okay? So we are going to mix this in the Mix Master. So I'm going to put this in here. And then we need 2 pounds and 3½ ounces of flour. So when you're making this for Javaccino, you're going to be weighing out 11 pounds of flour. Okay? But I've already measured this out, but I wanted to review. This is a baker scale. This is different than the scale that you've used earlier in class that was battery operated. This is a baker scale or a balance scale. And so when you, this is, if you remember with your electronic scale, you had to zero out the scale. Well, this is a container of salt, and it weighs the same amount as this plastic bowl. So this zeroes out the scale. If there was no flour in here and I took all the weights off, it would be balanced. So now you add your flour. Here's my 2-pound weight, and I have it at 3½ ounces, and the scale is balancing. That's equivalent to 7 cups of flour. Again, for Javaccino, you'll be weighing out 11 pounds of flour. I'm going to add about half of this to the mixing bowl. Okay. And I'll try not to get much of it on the counter. But I definitely missed. All right, I'm going to start this on a lower speed. And while that's mixing, I'm going to just do a real quick introduction to our industrial kitchen mixers while that mixes. So over in this part of the room, these are our industrial mixers. A lot of kitchens will call these Hobarts, but Hobart is a brand name. We didn't buy Hobart. But these are what you'll mix your cinnamon rolls in for Javaccino. So this is a much larger bowl, and if you see one side of it has a prong sticking out. That goes into this hole right here. And then these drop on. And if we zoom in here, you'll see that these slide on top to hold this bowl steady. Now when you're doing light mixing, that's not so important, but when we're kneading all that dough, 11 pounds of flour worth of dough, we need this bowl secured or it'll fly off. For cinnamon rolls, we're going to use all three attachments. This attachment is used to mix the dough, this is used to knead the dough, and this is used to make our cream cheese frosting. This has a prong. It's very similar to the Mix Masters that you use in class, the smaller ones. And it just hooks up there. There's a lever. There's two levers on this side of the machine. This lever has no speed or markings. That raises the bowl. You can drop the cage. This is the speed, and that's revolutions per minute. Right now it's on 100, which is nice and slow. Now something students forget is you have to turn on the timer. So you turn on the timer and you push start. And then if you need to stop it to scrape down the bowl, just push off. But if you find that you're pushing start and it's not working, it's simply because the timer's not on. Alright? Okay, we are back to our cinnamon roll dough over here. And I'm going to add the remaining part of the flour. And this time I'm going to be a little bit more careful how I put it in here so I don't get so much on the counter. Now again, when you turn on a mixer after you've added flour, you'll want to turn it on a very low speed or you will be wearing all the flour. Now this does not take long at all. What we are doing is incorporating in the rest of the flour to that mixture. And I forgot to add the yeast, so I'm going to go ahead and get all of that in there. Now, it's okay to add it before all of the flour has been incorporated. Typically, we would add that together with the milk. Okay, our dough is nice and mixed, so the next job is to knead it. So what I'm going to do is get the dough off of the paddle, and that usually comes off pretty good. Now the purpose of kneading is to develop the gluten. Cinnamon rolls rise a lot, so they need a good framework to hold their shape and to rise and support all of that. So we need to develop this gluten. So I'm going to kind of gather this as much as I can into a ball. This dough is still fairly wet, and that's because it's not done. It still needs to be kneaded. I'm going to attach the dough hook. Now again, you would do this on the large mixers on Javaccino day. I'm going to turn this on about medium speed, and it's going to take about 10 minutes to knead. So we'll be back in 10 minutes to show you the dough. Okay, we're back to take a look at our dough. So we're going to zoom in on the dough, and you'll see that it has formed a ball that has a nice elastic texture. So I'm going to show you how to make sure that you're done kneading. So I'm going to turn this off and drop it. Now I'm going to get some flour on my hands so my hands don't get covered with dough. And that just comes right off, which is a very good sign. And it should be fairly easy to get out of the bowl. Now, here it comes. There we go. Got it all in, got almost all of it in one piece. Okay. Now, I'm going to form this into a ball just to show you if it's done being kneaded. Okay. What you do is it's called the triangle test. You make a triangle with your hands and you press down. If it holds its shape, it's done. If it just goes right back to a smooth ball, it needs to be kneaded some more. This air bubble is also nice evidence that the dough is done being kneaded. and it's elastic, okay? It keeps coming back. All right, so this dough feels great. So in yeast spreads, there are 8 steps. And today I'm going to go over, we have measured our ingredients or scaled them, either one. Measured our ingredients is step 1. Mix and knead the dough is step 2. So we've done 2 of them. And step 3 is we have to let this dough ferment. All right, and when it ferments, it's going to double in size. That takes an hour at room temperature or overnight in the refrigerator. Now, usually for Javaccino, it'll depend on how our classes are laid out. The dough may sit for an hour, and then the class that comes in after that hour will continue with the rolls. Or we'll put that dough in the refrigerator to ferment, and then the following day, one of the classes will continue with the rest of the steps. Now, when the dough ferments, it's sitting, and you don't want this nice, smooth dough to get crusty and dry, like toast. All right? So what you do is you put a small amount of vegetable oil in the bottom of a bowl. Now for Javaccino, we're using larger bowls. Okay? And you put the dough in there, you spin it around, and so the bottom is all oiled, but the top is dry. So now we flip it over. It's kind of like putting on suntan lotion. You know, you want to make sure you cover all the edges. Okay? And then you can look, if you have some extra oil, you can pour it out, and it wasn't too bad. And now, you will cover this with plastic wrap if it's going in the refrigerator, or if it's sitting out at room temperature, or you can cover it with towels at room temperature. If it's going in the fridge, it must be securely covered with plastic wrap. And then I will see you when the dough has fermented.